Action. The universe is teeming with activity. There is motion everywhere. Nothing ever stands still. All activity comes from mind. If we want to be in line with things, we must move. This doesn't mean that we must strain or struggle, but we must be willing to do our part by letting the law work through us. God can do for us only as we will allow Him to do through us. Intelligence gives us ideas, and in our turn we work on them. But our fear is no longer done in any sense of doubt or fear, or our work is no longer done. For we know that we are dealing with something that can never be a mistake. We proceed with a calm confidence, born of the inner trust, in a power that is infinite. Behind all of our movements, then, is a great purpose, to let the law work through us. We must comply with the law of activity. We must be willing to take the way of outer activity. Jesus went to the tomb of Lazarus. We may have to go, but there will accompany us something that never fails. This law of activity we must use in our business. So many business places that we go into have such an atmosphere of inactivity, produce such a drowsy feeling that we at once lose all interest in what is going on. We don't feel like buying. We leave that place without any apparent reason and go into another. Here we feel that all is life, all is motion, all is activity. We feel confident that this is the place we are looking for. We will buy here. We find just what we want. We are satisfied with our purchase and go away cheerful. Now, to create this activity, something more than thought is essential. Not that it does not come first, but the one who has this thought of activity will naturally manifest it in a vigorous, energetic movement, which helps to produce a spirit of activity in his business and in everything he undertakes. Wherever you see a man who does not move, then you will find one whose thought is inactive. The two always go together. A man in a store or place of business should always be moving his goods. He should always be doing something. People will see this, and getting the thought of activity behind, will want to trade there. We are not attracted to a store that always has the same things on the same shelf. The world likes action, change. Action is life. Let a clerk in a store think activity and begin to manifest it, even though he may not be waiting on customers. In a short time, he will be waiting on them. Alertness is the word. Always be alert. There must be mental alertness before there can be physical activity. Act as though things were happening, even though they may not appear to be. Keep things moving, and soon you will have to avoid the rush. Activity is genius. Half the stores that you go into make you sleepy before you get out, and you feel as though you can't get out fast enough. The other half are alive, and those are the ones who are doing the business of the world. The man who is active in his thought doesn't have to sit by himself to think. He works while he thinks, and so complies with the law, which has to work through him. The thought of activity makes him move, and the thought of confidence makes his movements sure. And the thought of supreme guidance makes his work intelligent. We must be careful and not get into ruts. Always be doing something new and different, and you will find life becomes a great game in which you are taking the leading part. Life will never become tiresome to the active mind and body. It is so interesting that we wonder if we will ever get enough of it. Some people get into such lazy mental habits that a new idea cannot find entrance. Great things are done by people who think great thoughts and then go out into the world to make their dreams come true. If you can't find anything new to do, go home and change the bed around or the piano. Put the cook stove in the parlor and eat on the back step for a time. It will start something moving and changing in you that will never stop. The wide-awake person can find so many things to do that he hasn't time even to begin in this life, and he knows that eternity is necessary to carry out the ideals that he already has evolved. Everything comes from mind, but mind acts on itself, and we must act on ourselves and on conditions, not as a slave, but as a master. Be interested in life, if you want life to be interested in you. Act in life, and life will act through you. so will you also become one of the great people on earth. Ideas of the infinite. Suppose that we wish to draw from the universal mind some definite idea, some guidance, some information, some leading. How are we going to do this? First, we must become convinced that we can do it. Where do all the inventions come from? Where does Edison get his information about electricity? Where, if not direct from the mind of the universe? Everything that has ever come into the race comes direct from mind. It could come from nothing else. Every invention is but a discovery of something that already is, although we may not have seen it. Where does the harmony of music come from? Where could it originate except in mind? Does not a great musician listen and hear something that we do not hear? His ear is attuned to harmony, and he catches it straight from life itself and interprets it to the world. We are surrounded by the music of the spheres, but few of us ever catch the sound. We are so filled with trouble that the divine melody is never heard. If we could see, if we could hear, if we could understand, if we only realized the presence of the All, what could we not do? When a great thought springs up in the mind of an individual, when a great poem is written, when a great work of art is wrought by some receptive artist, it is simply a sign that the veil is thin between. He has caught a glimpse of reality. But for most of us, inspiration is not to be depended on, and we must take the slower but nonetheless sure method of receiving straight from the infinite. The method is a simple one and very effective. When you want to know a certain thing or how to begin a certain line of action, first you must be quiet within yourself. You must not be confused by any outward appearance. Never become disturbed by effects. They didn't make themselves and have no intelligence to contradict you. Be quiet until you realize the presence of absolute intelligence all around you, of the mind that knows. Now get a perfect picture of just what you desire. You cannot get a picture unless you know what it is you want. Put your mind in touch with the universal mind, saying just what you are waiting for. Ask for it. Believe you are receiving it and wait. After a few minutes, declare that you now know, even though you may not seem to know. Yet in the depths of consciousness, you have received the impression. Give thanks that you now receive. Do this every day until you get some direction. It is sometimes a good thing to do this just before going to sleep. Never, after you have done this, deny the knowledge that has been given you. The time will come when some ideas will begin to take form. Wait for it, and when it does appear, act upon it with all the conviction of one who is perfectly sure of himself. You have gotten understanding straight from the source of all understanding, knowledge from the source of all knowledge. All can do this if they will be persistent. It is a sure direction and guidance that will never fail us. But we must be sure that we are not denying in other moments what we affirm in the moments of faith. In this way, we will make fewer mistakes, and in time our lives will be controlled by supreme wisdom and understanding. Don't be a leaner. Never lean on other people. You have strength of your own that is great enough to do all that is necessary. The Almighty has implanted genius within the soul of everyone, and what we need to do is unearth that inner genius and cause it to shine forth. We will never do this while we look to others for guidance. To thine own self, repair, wait, thou within the silence dim, and thou shalt find him there. All the power and intelligence of the universe is already within, waiting to be utilized. The divine spark must be fanned into a blaze of the living fire of your own divinity. Self-reliance is the word to dwell on. Listen to your own voice. It will speak in terms that are unmistakable. Trust in your own self more than in all else. All great men have learned to do this. Every person within his own soul is in direct communication with the infinite understanding. When we depend on other people, we are simply taking their light and trying to light our path with it. When we depend on ourselves, we are depending on that inner voice that is God, speaking in and through man. Man is the inlet and the outlet to all there is in God. God has made us, and brought us up to where we recognize our own individuality. From now on, we will have to let Him express through us. If it were different, we should not be individuals. Behold, I stand at the door and wait. This is a statement of the near presence of power, but we, the individual, must open the door. This door is our thought, and we are the guardian of it. And when we do open the door, we will find that the divine presence is right at hand, waiting, ready, and willing to do for us all that we can believe. We are strong with the strength of the infinite. We are not weak. We are great and not mean. We are one with the infinite mind. When you have a real thing to do, keep it to yourself. Don't talk about it. Just know it in your own mind, what it is that you want, and keep still about it. Often when we think that we will do some big thing, we begin to talk about it, and the first thing we know, all the power seems to be gone. This is what happens. We are all sending out into mind a constant stream of thought. The clearer it is, the better will it manifest. If it becomes doubtful, it will not have so clear a manifestation. If it is confused, it will manifest only confusion. All this is according to the law of cause and effect, and we cannot change the law. Too often, when we tell our friends that we are going to do, they confuse our thought by laughing about it, by doubting our capacity to do so large a thing. Of course, this would not happen if we were always positive. But when we become the least bit negative, it will react, and we will lose that power of clearness which is absolutely necessary to good creative work. When you want to do a big thing, get the mental pattern. Make it perfect. Just know what it means. Enlarge your thoughts. Keep it to yourself. Pass it over to the creative power behind all things. Wait and listen. And when the impression comes, follow it with assurance. Don't talk to anyone about it. Never listen to negative talk or pay any attention to it, and you will succeed where all others fail. Causes and conditions. When we realize that life is not fundamentally physical, but mental and spiritual, it will not be hard for us to see that by a certain mental and spiritual process, we can demonstrate what we want. We are not dealing with conditions, but with causes. Causes originate only from the unseen side of life. This is not strange, as the same might be said of electricity, or even of life itself. We do not see life, we only see what it does. This we call a condition. Of itself, it is simply an effect. We are living in the outer world of effects, and in the inner world of causes. These causes we set in motion by our thought, and through the power inherent within the cause, expresses the thought as a condition. It follows that the cause must be equal to the effect, and that the effect always evaluates with the cause held in mind. Everything comes from one substance, and our thought qualifies that substance and determines what is to take place in our life. The whole teaching of the Bhagavad Gita is that there is but one, and that it becomes to us just what we first believe into it. In other words, we manifest the unmanifested. This in no way takes away from the omnipotence of God, but adds to it, for He has created something that is able to do this. God still rules in the universe, but we are given the power to rule in our lives. We must realize then absolutely that we are dealing with a substance with which we have a right to deal, and by learning its laws, we will be able to subject them to our use, just as Edison does with electricity. Law is, but we must use it. The substance that we deal with in itself is never limited, but we often are, because we draw only what we believe. Because we are limited is no reason why the universe should have limitation. Our limitation is only our unbelief. Life can give us a big thing or a little thing. When it gives us a little thing, it is not limited any more than life is limited when it makes a grain of sand, because it just as well have made a planet. But in the great scheme of things, all kinds of form, small and large, are necessary, which combined make a complete whole. The power and substance behind everything remain infinite. Now this life can become to us only through us, And that becoming is the passing of spirit into expression in our lives, through the form of the thought that we give to it. In itself, life is never limited. An ant has just as much life as an elephant, though smaller in size. The question is not one of size, but one of consciousness. We are not limited by actual boundaries, but by false ideas about life, and by a failure to recognize that we are dealing with the infinite. Limitation is an experience of the race, but it is not the fault of God. It is the fault of man's perceptions. And to prove that this is so, let any man break the bonds of this false sense of life, and he at once begins to express less and less limitation. It is a matter of the growth of the inner idea. People often say when they are told this, "Do you think that I decided to be poor and miserable? Do you take me for a fool?" No, you are not a fool, but it is quite possible that you have been fooled, and most of us have been. I know of no one who has escaped being fooled about life. You may not have had thoughts of poverty, but at the same time, you may have had thoughts that have produced it. Just watch the process of your thinking, and see how many times a day you think something that you would not want to happen. This will satisfy you that you need to be watchful, that your thoughts need to be controlled. What we need to do is to reverse the process of our thinking and see to it that we think only positive, constructive thoughts. A calm determination to think just what we want to think, regardless of conditions, will do much to put us on the highway to a greater realization of life. Of course we will fall. Of course the road is not easy, but we will be growing. Daily, we will be giving to the creative mind a newer and greater concept to be worked out into the life around us. Daily, we will be overcoming some negative tendency. We must stick to it until we gain the mastery of all our thoughts, and in that day we will rise never to fall again. We must be good-natured with ourselves, never becoming discouraged or giving up until we overcome. Feel that you are always backed by an omnipotent power and a kind Father of love, and the way will become easier. Mental equivalence. One of the most important things to remember is that we cannot demonstrate life beyond our mental ability to embody. We give birth to an idea only from within ourselves. What we are, we put into our thinking. What we are not, we cannot put into it. If we are to draw from life what we want, we must first think it forth into life. It always produces what we think. In order to have success, we must first conceive it in our own thought. This is not because we are creators, but because the flow of life into manifestation through us must take the form we give to it. And if we want a thing, we must have within ourselves the mental equivalent before we get it. This is what Jesus meant when he said that we must believe when we pray. This belief is providing within us that something which knows before it sees what it asks for. For instance, suppose a man is praying for activity. Our idea of prayer is the accepting of a thing before we get it, in his affairs. First, before this activity can come, he must have it within himself. He must come to see activity in everything. There must be something that corresponds to the thing that he wants. He must have a mental equivalent. We find that we attract to ourselves as much of anything as we embody within. As water will reach only its own level, so our outward conditions will reproduce only our inner realizations. A man will always draw to him just what he is, but we can learn to provide within the image of what we desire, and so, in a definite way, use the law to get just what we need. If at first we do not have a great realization of activity, we will have to work on what we do have, and as our outer conditions come up to meet the inner cause, we will find that it will be much easier to enlarge the inner receptivity for something greater and more worthwhile. Of one thing we may be assured. We must all start somewhere, and that somewhere is within ourselves. In this within, we must take the affirmation, and there too we must do the real work of realization. At the first, the way may seem hard, for we are constantly confronted with that which seems to be. and we are not always sure of ourselves, nor strong enough to overcome. But we may rest content in the assurance that we are growing. Every day we will be providing a bigger concept of life, and with the inner growth we will have an enlarged power to speak forth into the creative mind, with the result that we shall get a fresh impulse and be doing a bigger thing for ourselves. Growth and realization are always from within and never from without. The old race suggestion of fear and poverty and limitation must be done away with, and daily we must clear our thought from all that limits the One from showering forth in our life. Remember that you are dealing with one power and not with two. This will make it easier, for you do not have to overcome any condition, because conditions flow from within out and not from without in. A man going to a new town will at once begin to attract to him just what he brings in his thought. He should be very careful what he thinks. He should know just what he wants and daily give it over to the Supreme Mind, knowing that it will work for him. Old thoughts must be destroyed, and new must take their places. Every time the old thought comes, look at it squarely in the face and declare that it has no part in your mind. It has no power over you. You state the law and rely on it to the exclusion of all else. Daily try to see more and to understand more. Feel every day that you are being especially looked after. There is no special creation for any individual, but we all specialize the law every time we think into it, for all our thought is taken up and something is always done with it. A good practice is to sit and realize that you are a center of divine attraction, that all things are coming to you, that the power within is going out and drawing back all that you will ever need. Don't argue about it, just do it. And when you have finished, leave it all to the law, knowing that it will be done. Declare that all life, all love, and power are now in your life. Declare that you are now in the midst of plenty. Stick to it, even though you may not as yet see the result. It will work, and those who believe the most always get the most. Think of the law as your friend, always looking out for your interests. Trust completely in it, and it will bring you good to it.